HinduLounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact, and Hindu Pact is the Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective, an initiative of World Hindu Council of America or VHPA. And we have, as always, with us Utsada. Utsada is the executive director of Hindu Pact, and I am Ajay Shah. I am the president of World Hindu Council of America or VHPA. Hindu Lounge, usually Utsada comes live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern. But today, because of some unforeseen situations, we are starting a little bit late. So we apologize to our viewers who have still hung around with us and are joining us now. So with that, Sada, welcome to Hindu Lounge, and we have an exciting topic. But before that, some opening remarks for you from you before we get started. And I see that we also have Maya Durga with us today.
Namaste, Ajay bhai. Can you hear me clearly today? Because I see my video is a little
I can
off.
hear you just fine, Sada. It's perfect.
Okay, and do you see my video clearly?
I do see your video clearly as well.
Okay,
All
that's
good.
good. That's good. That's good. Because on my end, I feel like things are moving in
Uh,
it's not moving straight.
it's
So
it's one of those days.
yeah, so that's good. And yeah, so looking forward to the conversation today, Ajay bhai.
So that the two important topics, right? Today we are going to talk about the Maryland governor's election, and we talked about that election a little bit last week, and we do have an update now. And we also want to, now that the elections are over, these are the primaries. Now that the primaries are over, we want to talk a little bit more into it, and we want to talk about the ecosystem that is now in place that tries to bring down the Hindu candidates. That's our first topic, and the second topic today is Utsada and Adele Nazarian, who is our director for legislative communications, etc., was also visited a VHPA summer camp, and they had interesting conversations with the youth who are attending that camp. And so those are the main two topics. And there's some other news items for the week that we'll also talk about. But let's first start, Utsada, with the gubernatorial elections in your own home state of Maryland. Tell us, some people may not have joined last week. So tell us what happened and walk us through that.
Okay, so basically, like every other state that is going to elections for governors, there are primaries for both political candidates, and those primaries uh, usually happen on the same day, but sometimes it's not on the same day. In Maryland, you had the Democratic primaries and you had the Republican primaries. And in the Democratic primaries there were multiple candidates. The candidates are usually in groups, because it's not just an election for the position of governor, it's also an election for the position of lieutenant governor. And obviously Maya has a lot to say about that, as you can see behind me. uh, so what happened is that in Maryland's primaries for the Democratic Party, there were multiple sets of candidates being one for the governor and one for the lieutenant governor, who would be the assistant to the governor. So one such pair was the candidate of Wes Moore and Aruna Miller. Now, Aruna Miller is a Indian American who came to this country when she was 7 years old, uh, who who according to her own admission is considers herself a Hindu, a practicing Hindu. So Aruna Miller and Wes Moore campaign. And now you have to remember, Aruna Miller has been in politics for a long time. She has been a candidate for Congress as well, for the House of Representatives as well in the past. And I'll go into all those details. So Aruna Miller and Wes Moore's candidature was one ticket, and then there was another set of candidates, and that team was basically the team of King and Siri. So John King was in the Obama administration, uh, and he, along with the lieutenant governor's candidates, Michelle Siri. So it was John King and Michelle Siri's ticket that were also one of the primary candidates. What happened is that you halfway through the campaign, and in all the attacks and counter attacks that's going on, uh, these candidates, hold on just 1 minute. So anyway, so in the sorry about that, Ajay bhai.
No problem, no problem. Please go ahead.
Uh, so so at that the ticket, they started attacking the candidature of Aruna Miller, primarily Aruna Miller, but Westmore got attacked as well because it was a joint ticket. And the John King and the Michelle Siri tickets started attacking uh, Aruna Miller. People thought it's a fair competition. It's a primary, candidates attack each other. But suddenly, they came out with a press release on June 7th. And that press release said that the John King and Michelle Siri campaign has been made aware of the potential donor with ties to Islamophobia and Hindu fascists. The person, Aruna Miller's campaign is somehow connected to a Hindu fascist. So immediately, the supposedly the John King and the Michelle Siri candidate who received a donation from somebody who was a Hindu, they gave that money, $1,500, to Islamic advocates, and made a press release and a huge drama about it, saying this person who gave us $1,500, that person is a Hindu fascist, and that person has in the past supported Aruna Miller, and therefore we are giving this money to Muslim advocates, which is a quote unquote civil rights organization. So a whole drama and dance and thing was made, primarily to bring up the topic of Hindu fascism, quote unquote Hindu fascism, and how Aruna Miller is connected to Hindu fascists. And this was a press release. It came out. It picked up by the local media immediately. Now you have to remember, Aruna Miller and Westmore's campaign was leading the ticket. It was leading in the votes, whereas John King and Michelle Siri was way down, like number 3 or 4. So everybody started wondering, why is this attack coming? And we have seen this before. Hindu candidates, doesn't matter which political party they are from, Hindu candidates are attacked all the time. Just a few months ago, Raja Krishnamurthy's candidature was attacked in the primaries too. So we looked at those issues and we knew that something is wrong. And it was wrong. It so happens that Mariam Ahmad, a Muslim of Pakistani origin, she was the communications director of the John King candidature, and she used this ticket to basically run her Islamist anti-Hindu agenda. And we have seen this play out in other places. We have seen this play out in Chicago. We have seen this play out in Houston against Preston Kulkarni. We have seen this play out year after year after year, against many other Hindu candidates, okay, including Tulsi Gabbard. Like Tulsi Gabbard faced this right up to the point
And she was the first one to face this, right? She was just about the first that
Tulsi
we know
faced
of.
it year after year because she was in politics in mainstream for so long. She's still in the mainstream, but she's not contesting any ticket. So as of now, she has a respite. But the moment she runs for an office, she will be targeted by the Islamists. So this whole thing played out in Maryland, and the reason we are discussing this today is because last week it was publicly declared that that Westmore and Aruna Miller have won the nomination for the Democratic Party's gubernatorial ticket. It doesn't mean that they are winning the election. There is going to be a Republican candidate, and both sides are going to play it out. And there is a possibility they might win. There is a possibility they may not win, depending on how things are in the next 2 months. But what is important here is that that Aruna Miller, despite being slandered by the usual suspect, beginning with Mariam Ahmad, going up to twocircles.net, which is a website that is very close to Indian American Muslim Council, the organization that constantly spreads Hinduphobia. We have discussed how they run
Wait,
anti-Hindu
Uttara, you
campaigns.
talking about two circles, and then you talked about Mariam Ahmad, who is a Pakistani. Two Circles is run out of Hyderabad. It's an Indian Muslim website. So you mean to say that the Pakistanis and the Two Circle people are promoting the same agenda here?
Of course, and Ajay bhai, we have discussed this in. I would urge everybody who is new to Hindu Lounge to go back and hear some of our previous conversations. It's we have established it quite significantly over the past that there is a strong interlinking between the American Muslim lobby with some Islamists who are of Indian origin, with the Pakistani lobby, with the Jamaat Islami slash Muslim Brotherhood, unity as the connecting factor. So we have done multiple shows on that. We have discussed it in detail. Uh, but coming back to this race, the reason we are discussing it today is because now Aruna Miller is the candidate for the lieutenant governor from the Democratic Party side, along with Wes Moore, who is the gubernatorial candidate. And we have this whole thing now kind of dying down with Peter Frederick, believe it or not, publicly coming out and saying that Aruna Miller has won the elections, and she's a Hindutva fascist, blah blah blah. So this old record, broken record, is playing itself out, where every time there is a Hindu who is standing for elections, doesn't matter which political party they are, doesn't matter even if they call themselves Hindu. There Sri Preston Kulkarni barely identified as a Hindu, and he was attacked. Just a Hindu name is enough. But you have to say that every time this happens, I have to admit that I give more and more respect and credit to Tulsi, who faced this year after year for more than 5-6 years up until the presidential campaign. So this is par for the course now. But just to step back a little bit, if you look at Aruna Miller's campaign, the reason she was targeted was because she was donated. She was her campaign was donated to
She received some money, yeah.
by people, two well-known people in the American Hindu community, and one being Ramesh Bhutada, who is a pretty successful Hindu American from Houston, and he's known to be close to many Hindu organizations. He's a philanthropist who has donated to many Hindu
Yeah, part
causes,
of the part of Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, part
and
of
he
Hindu
has been
Gubernatorial.
connected to our organization as well, quite well. But his only fault is that he calls himself a Hindu, and he's a proud Hindu, and he is a supporter of Prime Minister Modi in India. Uh, there are thousands of people across in America who have been supporters of friendly governments and their leaders across the board. That should not be a reason to target somebody. Another person who was similarly targeted is a doctor named Sudhir Saxena, who is from Baltimore, a Maryland resident as well. He also donated quite a bit to the Aruna Miller campaign, not just this time, but in the past, in 2017, when she was running for the candidacy of Maryland's 6th congressional district. Uh, Aruna Miller's campaign was donated to by Sudhir Saxena. It was a very successful doctor in Baltimore, also connected to Hindu organizations in America. Uh, I don't see anything wrong in that. In fact, Sudhir Saxena ji is a donor to Ekal Vidyalaya, which is one of the largest single teacher education project in the Indian subcontinent. They run schools for poor kids in Nepal. They run schools for poor children in tribal areas in Bangladesh. They do that in India, of course, in big areas of India. Even in Pakistan, uh, they have started schools for kids who need support, especially in the tribal rural areas. They've started one case. So this Exeria has been a philanthropist who has donated to all these wonderful causes, but he's a very proud Hindu. He calls himself a Hindu. So that is the reason why he was targeted, and Aruna Miller was targeted. Now,
So let me ask you a couple of questions. So maybe that helps me and other people who are listening to you get some clarification here. It almost seems like that there is an ecosystem out there. They look at the names of the candidate. The candidates have Hindu sounding name. Then they jump into the what quote unquote the opposition research. They find out all the donors, and they find out donors who may have done any good work for Hindus or have been associated with any Hindu organization, and then they target that candidate and say that this candidate is supported by Hindu fundamentalists and nobody should be voting for this candidate. This is probably one step away by saying that this candidate as a Hindu belongs to a particular caste, and that's why I should not be voting for this. And then other thing you said is that this is the ecosystem which is where a supposed news site like twocircles.net is involved in publicizing this, and they have been backed up by Indian American Muslim Council and their lackeys like Peter Frederick, who always find common cause with the Indian American Muslim Councils or one of the other, half a dozen Muslim organizations whose purpose in life is to oppose Hindus. Is that basically a good summary?
Not just Peter Frederick, and
And that's
that's
why I
that.
said people like Peter Frederick.
But there is another very interesting person whose name I still want to name,
Okay.
because people listening out there, especially people who are young people in campuses and people in New Jersey area who are very active in the Hindu cause, this name will ring in their ears. Audrey Trushke was also involved in this.
And in
So
what way?
so Audrey Trushke, as most of you who are listening to us know, and most of you who have been following the Hindu issues in America know, is a perennial Hindu hater. She's a professor. She's a faculty. I won't say she's a professor, but she's a faculty at Rutgers University. She constantly runs anti-Hindu campaigns. She empathizes with every cause that can bring Hindu down, beginning with showing up in Khalistan rallies, and praising historical leaders in the Muslim world who have massacred and committed genocide against Hindus, written books about in support of them. So Audrey Trushke is basically a poster child of anti-Hindu hate in America. I mean, I personally believe that she's just the poster child. There are other people behind her who are doing far worse work than Audrey Trushke does. But she's known, quite popular, and because Hindu community has looked at her as the front end of the attacks that they face. So Audrey Trushke actually also tweeted about this issue, and she connected this whole issue to the attacks on Hindu community across America. So she basically said, this is par for the course because these Hindus in America support Hindutva, and that's why they should be attacked. And they actually, goes out on and congratulates on June 14th the John King and Michelle Siri campaign. And she additionally, this is worth noting, she additionally names California Progressive Democratic Progressive Caucus. Now, California Democratic Progressive Caucus is one organization that has supported the Khalistan movement as well. So you can see the connection here. See, she connects the Syrian King campaign with California Progressive Democratic Caucus. She herself shows up in Khalistan rally. So it's not just anti-Hindu from the position of Islamist narrative, it's also anti-Hindu from the position of anti-India narrative that emerges from Pakistan. So you see there's a common thread, a common factor in all these narratives, and you can easily see where it comes from, which is Pakistan or their lackeys in America.
So if I understand this right, the Pakistan is directly involved in bringing down the Hindu candidates in America in order to limit the influence that India has in state houses as well as in the Congress, and they are working through some of the organizations that are Indian Muslim organizations.
That is
Uh,
correct, and it gets confirmed again and again because of the intersectionality of Khalistanis and the Islamists on many of these attacks. They are operating together. They're not even hiding that. So
yeah.
that tells you who is at the back end of it. Because any other global entity, including Muslim Brotherhood linked entities, the Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat Islami, they are very hesitant to bring up the Khalistan cause unless there is a push from Pakistan or Pakistani elements. So every time you see a Khalistani angle to an anti-Hindu narrative coming from the Islamist side, I usually connect the dots and see a Pakistani role in it, and usually it proves right.
And,
It
and
comes.
this became somewhat interesting because the opponent, as you said, mentioned earlier, actually went and returned the money they had gotten from some of the Indian Americans. uh, Now that is unusual in politics. People generally,
No, no, no. They didn't return the money. They didn't
the
return the
campaign
money.
money was returned, I believe. The
No, no, no.
opposition, no, no,
This is
not
the
by
funny.
not by Aruna Miller, by the other party.
Yeah, they didn't return it.
They
They
didn't
gave
get it.
it to a Muslim organization called Muslim Advocates.
Oh,
So they are so brazen in their statement. So they are making a bigger statement here. They're not saying we don't want your money. They're saying we'll take your money and give it to an organization that works for the Islamic cause, whatever that, however they perceive it. So, so it's literally like not just giving your money back, because that's literally like, throwing it back at your face. That would have shown some amount of self-respect on the part of the King and Siri campaign. The fact that they went ahead and gave this money to Muslim advocates also shows that they want to rub it on your face and make a statement, public statement. That's the level of Hindu hate that they carry. And I don't think the Siri King campaign, and this is something that our community, Hindu American community, should actually look into. uh, and I was making notes to myself. At some point we should have a conversation with the Siri and King campaign and see how far they actually knew what was going on, and how far their campaign was hijacked by their communication director Miriam Ahmed, and how far they are willing to admit that. They can,
because
I
this
can
is
see, everybody
really
can see.
truly, I mean, if this perpetuates even more, already the Hindu candidates are on the edge, because you're in the thick of the campaign, and all of a sudden this gets offloaded onto you. And there's very little time to respond in a particular election cycle. So this has to be countered, and to be countered comprehensively. So that there's so many Hindu and Indian political action committees, and what is their role in all of this?
Well, that is true, and I'm pretty sure that I'm aware of many American Hindus in Maryland and local Washington D.C., Virginia area. We have the tri-state area, Maryland, Washington D.C., Virginia, who are looking at this very closely, and I communicate with them very closely. I work
No,
with
but
them.
so my question is, what did they do to come and defend Aruna Miller in the thick of the campaign?
Well, they did come out in support of Aruna Miller, and they met her and they assured her of their support in the primaries. Now, of course, there would be many American Hindus who are Republicans, so they don't vote in the primaries. They don't get to vote in the Democratic primaries. So those who
Well,
were
the majority
Democrats,
of the Indian Americans, Hindu Americans, are Democrats. I mean, the latest data I saw is about 68% to
correct,
72% uh,
correct.
are Democrats. So did they come out and vociferously counter this? Was there a
They did come out and countered it as much as they could. A lot of the community felt that the more they come out as Hindus in support of Aruna Miller publicly, the more cannon fodder. And this is something that it's a debate, it's a topic that we should debate
Yeah,
within
that
our
that
community.
actually that actually tells the next candidate that they better not bring up their Hindu roots, because the Hindu
Exactly.
community did not vocally come out and support it. So I was observing it from a distance, and I was waiting for the news item to emerge in the Indian American media saying that the Indian community and the Hindu community has vociferously come out in support of Aruna Miller. I did not see that. With all the political posturing that the Hindu community does in America, there was no vocal support other than a statement. There was no mass movement in support for Aruna Miller. Neither was there one for Sri Kulkarni. Neither was there one for Tulsi Gabbard. So yeah, there was more of whimpers saying that yeah, we are behind you, we support you, but also hesitance in coming out because they don't want to give the other party more voice in some ways. Now, I bet Utsada, if any Muslim candidate was maligned in the way Aruna Miller was maligned for basically working with the Hindu organization or getting some donation from a Hindu who is affiliated with Hindu organization, a Muslim advocacy group would be crying Islamophobia from the rooftops, and a Jewish organization would be crying anti-Semitism, and so would any other faith-based organization. Where were the Hindu organizations?
So the Hindu organization did come out and made, I won't say made a campaign out of it, but they came out in support of
Why
Aruna.
not a campaign, Utsada?
I'll tell you the
Can we,
reason as
can
well.
we survive this
Because
way?
it's a chicken and egg scenario. I'll tell you why. Because if a Muslim organization had come out in support of a candidate who was heckled for being a Muslim, you would see the mainstream media coming out in support of them. Okay, if a Jewish person obviously gets tagged and targeted by anti-Semitic activists, which there are a lot of in America, including mostly coming from the Muslim American community, they would have been covered by the mainstream media. Look at the news in UCLA, where a faculty actually quit, complaining that she was targeted because she's a Jewish person and she supports Israel, and that became big news. It came in CNN. Aruna Miller's story doesn't appear anywhere because it's a chicken and egg scenario. Hindus are not given the same respect in American mainstream by the media or by the intellectual you know talking heads, and the Hindu community, because of that, and it's a vicious cycle, is not that vociferous in coming out in support of their candidates. Now I have to qualify Sri Kulkarni's situation, though. We cannot put Sri Kulkarni and all these other people in the same basket, because they are not in the same basket. Sri Kulkarni, before the Hindu community could even come out in support of him, he went ahead and apologized and begged forgiveness from the Islamic community. Okay, he didn't even give the Hindu community a chance to come out in support of him.
But Hindu community still went and supported him.
I mean, the Hindu community still supported him, and he did not win. Because
Well,
there was
he
a
did
big
not
section
win,
of,
but I saw
but
some
there was a big
pictures
section
of
of the
the
Hindu community that did
rallies
not
in his
support him.
support and all of that, right? There were rallies supporting, Sri Kulkarni, even after he had explicitly said, "Well, I don't want your
So,
support and
so
I don't want you," and all of that.
so exactly. So point
Yeah.
point that you are making two different points in one point, and actually they are contradictory. So
Okay.
what I'm saying
Tell me
here
why.
is, because you just said that the Hindu community should anyway come out in support,
No, no,
irrespective
I
of what.
said they did. What I'm saying, in Sri Kulkarni's case, Sri Preston Kulkarni's case, even after he had denounced the Hindu organizations, Hindus still actually did public rallies to support him. I don't know why, but that actually happened, right? Because we saw the
No.
pictures.
It wasn't that significant a support. This is my understanding of it. The Hindus voted in large numbers for the Republican candidate because Preston Kulkarni did not, he went out and begged for forgiveness from the Muslim groups and so on and so forth. So I think she's is a very good example of why somebody should not, fall for the trap that the Muslims set, or the Muslim organization set, because then you neither get support from them nor do you get support from your own side. The Sri Kulkarni's example is a very good example. Tulsi, on the other hand, continued to counter them, continued to expose them, continued to stand by her ground and her identity very strongly. And so Tulsi's campaign was a very good example of how you have to deal with these detractors. I have to give it to a little bit to Raja Kulkarni as well, because even though Raja Kulkarni was attacked so viciously by this entire ecosystem, anti-Hindu ecosystem, Raja Kulkarni did manage to create the conditions that led to mainstream American leaders and mainstream American leaders in the African American community to come out and
Starting from
support him.
Jesse Jackson.
Exactly. So Jesse Jackson Sr. came out in support of Raja Kulkarni, made statements. Not just that, I think it was the Auditor General of Illinois, state of Illinois, another African American, who came out in support of Raja Kulkarni and denounced the activism that the Muslim group was doing. Basically, it was the same group. It's Peter Frederick, Muslim Brotherhood, Jamaat-e-Islami, Pakistani supported Islamists, and Indian American Muslim Council. So that was a big backfire on, and I have to say that credit goes to Raja Kulkarni for managing this counter response very deftly. Okay,
Yeah.
and I mean, there are people who are Democrats, there are people who are Republican, there are people who are Republican who don't like Raja Kulkarni, there are people who are Democrats who also don't like Raja Kulkarni, but you have to hand it to him for managing this deftly in the last 2 months.
So
Coming back to Aruna Miller's case, I
yeah.
think I think this was and this is Hindu Pact tweeted this actually, that this was a good example of how, when you keep repeating a lie a thousand times, it's a you keep using a Goebbelsian tactics against Hindus, it starts backfiring at some point. And I think Aruna Miller's campaign and the fact that Aruna Miller won the ticket despite a strong competition from very good candidates like Tom Perez, who was a very high official under Obama administration also. So this was a perfect example of backfiring of a campaign, and I'm really happy that Peter Frederick and Miriam Ahmed got such a bloody nose. They ended up on the bottom of the almost at the bottom of the Democratic
Yeah,
ticket.
but so this is such a, this is almost like on a case by case, you have to fight this. Right? What is the long term, what was the long term strategy that we should be adopting here? Because it can't be, there has to be a comprehensive view, because there is a pattern here, and pattern is very clear, starting with Tulsi Gabbard all the way up to Aruna Miller and many more candidates to follow. In fact, there were attacks on candidates in New York, Hindu candidates in New York, attacks on Hindu candidates everywhere, especially Hindu candidates who are a part of Democratic ticket. Um, how do you, as a Hindu organization like ours, which is non-partisan, uh, how do you actually counter this? Yeah, one counter could be that, okay, well, all the Hindus just jump from Democratic Party to Republican. That's not practical, that's not realistic, that should not happen anyway, because there are Hindus who fall into a pretty large spectrum of political belief. So it's not like you're asking Hindus to join one political party and dump another one or any of that. So within the confines of that particular political party, in the political party, and within the confines of a larger political discourse, if you want to counter this, how do you do this? What should be the strategy?
Well, in my opinion, the strategy for not just for organizations like ours which are non-partisan, but in general for all American Hindus, the goal should be to assess three things. Number one, how much of a how strongly does the candidate identify as a Hindu, and why is the candidate being targeted? That's number one. Number two, and this is something that we do all the time as in terms of research, who are the people targeting the candidate? More often than not, it's the same group of people who are targeting this candidate, and it is usually the reason that the fact that they have just Hindu sounding name, and they have not explicitly disowned their Hindu identity and started working with the other side. So they will spare a candidate like, let's say, Pramila Jayapal, because Pramila Jayapal would explicitly denounce Hindu issues. She will explicitly work against, bring resolutions against India. So you have to be literally disowning who you are and working against India as a primary requirement for the other side not attacking you. So once you assess that these two conditions are being applied to this candidate, I think it's very easy for the American Hindu community and organizations like us to support the candidate's positions as American Hindus. We don't support everything the candidate does, but we would defend the candidate as an American Hindu, and as any American who has the right to fight an election without facing racist attacks on them. That's the right of every American. That's unconstitutional the way these people are getting attacked. And the challenge for us here is that how do we make this a national issue? So a small section of the American Hindu community is responding to this, including
Yeah,
us.
yeah,
There are maybe, I would say, not more than 15% of the American Hindus are even aware of what's happening. The challenge for us here is, and that's the larger strategic objective that we have to fulfill as organizations, as advocacy groups, is that how do you take this message and this reality that we face election after election at every level, state or Washington, that more than 15%, the audience that responds to this goes up from just 15% of the Hindus to, let's say, 50 to 60% of the Hindus. If we are successful in creating that level of awareness, imagine there are 6 million American Hindus. If we make it up to 3 million American Hindus who are mentioning this issue or talking about this issue, that's a huge number. And that then will translate into outreach in the mainstream media. That will translate into in participation from political parties at the national level, and that, I think, will turn the scale against the Islamists and their allies. because that's when they will realize that they have no space to share this hate around. But that is not happening. I mean, just look at the Democratic Party and the way Democratic Party at the national level or even at the state level is responding to this. They try to hide from this, other than in the case of Raja Krishnamurthy, where some civil rights leader came out in support of him.
Well, because
There is,
one thing that helps Raja Krishnamurti is that he's an incumbent. So it's very much harder for someone who's not an incumbent to counter this. And so
but even look at the case of Tulsi in the
yeah,
primaries, in the Democratic primaries, she was attacked by the same people, but no other candidate from the Democratic Party in the presidential primaries came out in support of her. Nobody.
yeah,
Everybody thought, including the current vice president's team, everybody thought, how can we use this to our benefit? And if there is any angle we can
yeah. In
benefit
fact,
from.
Tulsi was probably the only candidate in the history of Democratic Party who won the delegates but was not allowed to speak at the Democratic National Convention,
Correct,
which is
correct.
very, very
So, so,
unusual.
and she wrote in quite a bit of length about how there was institutionalized Hinduphobia in the party itself at the topmost level, and we saw that in the campaign. I mean, despite all our friends who are close to the Biden, who were close to the Biden campaign, who donated huge sums of money to the Biden campaign, they could not get the Biden campaign to get convinced to put up a page for the Hindu American communities, even though they put up page for Catholics and Jews and Muslims and you know you name it. Hindu Americans were completely ignored. Even India was brought under the larger South Asian banner, which is
Yeah.
essentially a homage
Yeah,
to the
not only
United
that,
States.
it's I mean, the rebranded uh, Biden for America, which is now South Asians for America or something like that. They are now actively supporting political candidates, and this majority of a majority Indian American organization with a lot of Hindu sounding name people in it is now actively supporting candidates who have asked for, and we should do our next show should be on that, so that as we get closer to election, not one of the next shows, they are actually supporting candidates who are asking for Kashmir to be separated from India. So
Correct,
the
correct.
vocal pro-Pakistani candidates supported by majority an organization that is majority Hindu.
But you have to, Ajay bhai, at the cost of sounding like I'm not a I am actually a bipartisan person. It's not any better in the Republican side in many ways, because see, the thing is that in the Republican side also there has been a consistent lack of Hindu voices, very consistent lack of Hindu voices. From the time of Trump's second election campaign onwards, there were no prominent American Hindus who were given a platform in the Republican side either. So that is something that those of our listeners and our supporters, Hindu American leaders, that they need to work on. Even those who are on the Republican side, there is very little voice of American Hindus in the Republican Party as well.
Yeah,
And
in fair, I mean, I would actually say that the former president, President Trump, should have made more of an outreach to Hindu Americans, like he did in the first election, where he went actually to a meeting organized by American Hindus, rather than making an outreach to a particular, rather than doing an outreach by going to India. I think he would have been much, I think our issues, our political interests, all of that for American Hindus lie in America, not in India. And I think that the focus should have been there. But regardless, so any final thoughts on this topic? Because this is something that we will track, we'll continue talking about, especially as the election comes closer. I definitely want to talk a lot more about the South Asians for America as a special topic, and maybe even invite one of the representatives from South Asians for America to come and defend the positions that they've taken. And see if they come and show up. We'll have a special conversations over coffee with one of their representatives, and to see how they are selecting candidates. and how they are, why they have selected certain candidates. Let's let them put on let them invite let's invite them and have them present their viewpoints. Again, we are non-partisan, so we really have, we're not advocating for one political party or the other. We seek to understand both the political parties.
No,
So
I hear you, Ajay bhai, and my point, parting point on this topic would be that, and you actually segued very well into it. We are actually doing awareness in the community
yeah.
on these targeted anti-Hindu campaigns. Uh, it's a larger presentation to members of our community, including to the younger generations who, in a couple of years, would be active voters. Some of them already are, and this is part of a larger anti-Hindu narrative that is in America. And if you go and follow our Twitter account, at the rate Hindu Pact, you'll see there is a very good article written by a Korean scholar, uh, and we posted it yesterday, where he talks about exactly the same thing, about how in American universities it's starting at the university level and then it's spreading around in the society. So this is a larger issue. This, what you see at the political level, is a manifestation of that larger hate campaign that is running across American society, in the public square, in corporate world, uh, in the professional areas, as well as in politics. You know, in our presentation that we made to the youth camp in VHPA, the VHP America youth camp in Maryland, actually just last week, myself and Adel Nazarian,
Yeah, that
our
was that's our next topic. So let's just transition to that topic. You and Adele both were you both went to the VHPA youth camp that took place in Maryland, I believe, and you gave a presentation and you talked about the Hindu identity to a lot of kids who were present over there in the camp. You went there for, I believe, 3 or 4 days, 4 days, and I want to know, what did you talk about? What was your experience on the first day? And what was your experience in the last day? And do you think that you provoked some thinking among the youth about Hindu issues? Were you able to, so two things: one, were you able to learn something from them about the kind of issues they are facing in the school? And were you able to tell them about the importance of Hindu identity and how to counter some of these issues by standing proud and tall as Hindus?
So I went there 3 days. So the way it worked was, and this was our first presentation, so we had a lot of take back home lessons for us. Uh, but the age group we were reaching out to was in the age group of like 14 to 20, mostly in the 14 to 20 age group. There were about 20 25 students, members of the community. uh, so I'll tell you what we did. It was a 3 day presentation with 1 day in gap in between, so they had get some time to contemplate and think about what we discussed on the first 2 days. Adele, gave the presentation. It focused on a whole variety of topics and spaces where Hindus get targeted. It started with historical references of dotbusters and how historically American Hindus and Indian Americans have been targeted, and then it went on to discuss some of the core hate issues that the Southern Baptist Convention back in the 90s, how it used to demonize and literally call for conversion of every Hindu in the world to Christianity. So it gave a back end reference of inbuilt hate that was already there in the American society quite a bit in the 80s and the 90s. But now it goes on, in the presentation goes on to cover how it is being institutionalized now. And in the modern context, we referred to the beautifully written report from the NCRI labs at Rutgers University, just came out 2 weeks ago, on anti-Hindu disinformation in social media. A very well written report. And we also referred to how in schools bullying happens based on anti-Hindu tropes and narratives, how the Gandhi statues across America and even in Canada are getting vandalized in a very, very organized manner. How American Hindus are targeted on the basis of caste, and that's a growing effort and project of the Islamists and the Christian right. So it's a very toxic combination. So we discussed all of that, and to answer your question about the feedback we got from the students and what we learned from them, So on the first day, it was a camp atmosphere, it was a play area atmosphere. So it took them a while to start focusing on these serious issues. And once they started thinking about it, on the second day, they started talking about uh, many of the issues that they have faced themselves. So the most common issue was that there is very little understanding and knowledge about Hindu dharma in general. Most students said that their friends in school, or in the society that they live in, do not even know what Hindu dharma is, or who a Hindu is. Most of them just have the perception that anybody who doesn't speak Spanish and is quote unquote brown skin, it must be a Muslim. Because and we have discussed this in the past. America runs on the color chart narrative. They will judge you and put you in a box based on the color of your skin, and that is stronger now than ever before. And that was one of the feedbacks we got. Everybody is like, oh, you look a certain way, your color shade is a certain way. Do you speak Spanish? No. Okay, then you must be a Muslim. So
And
that was one
that
issue
is
that these
surprising,
guys
right?
are.
Because there are probably more there are probably more uh, brown color people who are Hindus than there are Muslims.
Absolutely, and there are many white people who are Muslims. There are many white people who are Hindus. There are many black people who are Muslims. There are many black people, African Americans, who are Hindus. Uh,
But there are a lot
so
more. There are a lot more African Americans because of historic reasons, because of Nation of Islam being here for a long time and all that. A
correct,
lot
correct,
more African Americans. So if you really look at the people who have a skin color, which is like yours and mine, which is brown skin color, people
right.
who have origin in the Indian subcontinent, most of the people who are brown in skin color, who are not, and I'm not talking about people who are from the one of the Central or South American countries, they are Hindus, and yet people get tagged as Muslims.
Correct. So the two main things that stood out in the conversation was this whole cow caste curry narrative that is mainstream in America. Caste being now a very important narrative that is being enforced on the Hindus, even at the educational level, because in schools they teach, if there is 2 pages of discussion on Hindu dharma, one of those page would be dedicated about caste. And so I in my explanation, said that imagine teaching about Christianity and Islam in 2 pages and dedicating 1 page to how much both these religions actually support slavery. I mean, that's the closest definition I can bring to that, the level of disingenuity that description of Hinduism is given to in America. But so two things stood out: enforced discussion on caste. Number two, cow and deity worship. How we have polymorphic. Hindu dharma is a polymorphic faith, polytheist faith, and how it involves multiple deities, including worshipping the cow. That's number two, which is almost the same as one and two combined together. Misinformation. And number three, this whole idea that swastika is a bad sign, and that is now mainstream in America. All Hindu organizations are working against it now, and it's a very welcome development. so so swastika was the third issue that came up. and
And
and yeah.
yeah, no. So what was the reaction
so
when
so
you explain?
so we discussed all this in the first 2 days, and we gave explanation, and we went back and forth. On the third day we took a break, and we just gave them some time to think. And on the fourth day, when I went back and discussed, they came up with ideas about how to counter it. And the most common underlying statement that they gave was education, education, education. We need to talk more about who we are. It is our responsibility to describe Hindu dharma to the rest of the American society. We should be very careful about becoming too flaky about it. uh, that was also one of the feedbacks that I got from people, that we should not get overly sensitive about some of the Hindus wearing bindi, or Hindus wearing traditional clothes. you know it's fine. There can be some stereotyping in a positive way, but we have to tell people who Hindus are. And another feedback that came in, even though it was not verbalized very clearly, is that we have to tell people that India and Hindu Dharma are not the same thing. And I think that was something that a lot of youth wanted to say in many ways, but did not verbalize it. But that's something that we should carry forward as a community.
Okay. So that, thank you. I appreciate all the work that you and Adele did in going to the camps. Yeah, I know it's quite a drive or a drive for both of you, and to go there every day for 3 days. That's substantial amount of time. I think this is the investment in time that will pay off. Pay off quite quite handsomely. With that, Utsada, if there are any no other comments, I want to bring up a couple of quick news items, and then to our regularly scheduled. I have a surprise for you, but I'll bring up that surprise as well for you in a minute. I don't think you know about it. Um, so if is there any final comments before I move on to the next topic?
No, Ajay bhai, please, let's
So
move on to
that
the
I
next
don't know
topic.
if this has to be classified as the Hindu good news of the week or not, but it's certainly a Hindu news of the week, even if it is not good news of the week. Hey, our Taliban are now asking Afghanistan's Hindus and Sikhs to come back. So that your thoughts on that? I mean, look, I mean, their Taliban's have turned a corner, and they are now they want to now they are asking for Hindus to come back, and maybe one of these days you'll see the Hindu kingdom being re-established in Afghanistan at this rate, right?
I think the Taliban must declare Afghanistan to be a secular country. Number one,
Not Hindu country.
and that's a process. So let's start with what is realistic.
Also, I
I
think you
want,
aim too low. You're aiming too low. I
Ajay
think
bhai,
I think
you asked me for a sincere answer. I will give you a
I
sincere
am very
answer.
sincere. I mean, there are
If you
who
want
does.
to move from one rhetorical point to another rhetorical
Uh,
point,
but,
then I can
but,
do that also.
but so that they're asking for Hindus to come back, isn't that a positive sign?
So Ajay bhai, if you want me to answer, I'm going to
Yes,
answer it.
please go
You
ahead.
asked me what should Taliban do to
Okay,
show that Hindus can come back. So I'm giving
okay,
you that answer. I'm
all
not
right,
giving you a rhetorical answer.
all right.
So the number one, Taliban should declare Afghanistan a secular country. Number two, they should rebuild at least five major Hindu historical monuments across the country, uh, and we can help them with that. And then I think the Hindus and the Sikhs will feel safer, relatively safer, uh, to begin to think about coming back, because the biggest fear that Hindus and Sikhs have is, number one, they will not be alive. Number two, they will be forced to convert to Islam. Number three, all their monuments will be desecrated, and they have been desecrated throughout the history of Afghanistan by Islamists, including by the Taliban when they were in power the last time. So there is a lot of journey to be traveled by the Taliban, and I'm saying this with good faith. This is not a rhetorical answer as Ajay Bhai was expecting from me. uh, this is a sincere response to what appears to be a PR exercise by the Taliban to gain global acceptability. And I will have a show very soon, Ajay Bhai, on a TV channel where we will be discussing this with Afghan Hindus and Sikhs. So maybe next week we'll have that conversation.
So that I want to let me ask you this: if you were an Afghan Sikh, or if you're an Afghan Hindu, uh, would you go back?
Not under the current conditions.
What I mean, I think, yeah, I think it would be, uh, I think as a political statement to say that Hindus will go back is one thing, but I think the reality on the ground, where anyone at any time can bomb your place of worship and kill you, uh, it doesn't seem like a very inviting environment. And also note that uh, it is not just Taliban over there. There's ISIS and Taliban, and you don't know who's going to target you on a given day.
See, that is the biggest fear. That's what I'm saying. The thing with the Taliban is that there is no one Taliban. Forget about ISIS. I mean, ISIS is a whole new different entity, or claims to be a different entities. There are multiple ISIS factions as well, each one very eager to kill off every non-Muslim, in fact every non-Sunni that they can find Forget about Muslims. Within Muslims, they will target Sunnis, as they have done to the Hazaras all the time. So, there is the ISIS, which is eager to kill off everybody who's a non-Sunni, and then there are multiple factions of the Taliban, many of whom are at loggerheads with each other, some of whom are controlled by Pakistan's military, Pakistan's ISI, but not all are controlled by Pakistan's ISI. So there are so many factors and actors in this, each with a fish to fry, almost all of them not liking non-Muslims. So it is extremely hard to even achieve the conditions that I said in my sincere response, that establish Afghanistan constitutionally as a secular country. So just that establishing itself would require so much struggle and so much consensus about amongst the powers that be, that it is almost impossible to achieve. And if somebody is even able to achieve that, I think that's an encouraging sign for their from there onwards. But you have to also understand, Ajay, that many Hindus in Afghanistan, many Sikhs in Afghanistan have been people who have been living on that land for close to 7,000 years. They are not, I repeat, and if anybody, there are 7 people listening to us at this time. I'm
No,
pretty
no,
sure.
seven. That number is not accurate because
Okay,
there
there are
are
more than
people.
7 people listening to us.
There are dozens of people are listening to us right now because
Whoever is listening to us and whoever will
yeah,
listen to us,
because
it
a
is
lot of
very
these channels are
important
not
for them to
counted.
understand that Afghan Hindus are not Indians who migrated to Afghanistan. They are not. Afghan Hindus and Sikhs are Afghans, or pre-Afghans, before it was even known as Afghanistan. They were Bactrians, they were Shahi Hindus. They have been living on that land for the last 7,000 years as Hindus. And, later on, some of their elder sons became Sikhs. So then Hindus and Sikhs in the last 300 years. So they are not Indians. You have to understand that. So it is their homeland. And therefore, we have to be very careful about, permanently detaching it from their homeland. But at the same time, we have to preserve them, protect them, and give them all the support they need.
Absolutely. So that is I think there's a very, very important point you made, that when we talk about Hindus and Sikhs in Afghanistan, we are not talking about the people who have actually migrated that at any given point of time. These are the Hindus and Sikhs who are at one time, even in the Mahabharat period. If you recall, Gandhari came from Gandhar. These are the Hindus who are absolutely natives to Afghanistan, have been for at least 7,000 years that we know of, or recorded history. And there is no, it is just that through the 1,000 years, they have been made, they have been, they've been persecuted enough, they have been massacred, they've been, and during various eras of history, that they have had to leave the land that they've lived in for 7,000 years at least, if not longer.
In fact, there are many Hindus in northern part of India who are actually refugees from Afghanistan over the past 1,000 years.
Yeah.
There are Hindus in what is present day Punjab. There are Hindus in what is present day Kashmir, in Jammu area, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand. Big chunks of Hindus who live in that area, a large sections of them used to live historically in what is present day Multan, what is present day Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and what is present day Afghanistan.
All right. Utsada, with that, Hindu good news of the week. And I think, Utsada, you'll be happy to hear this. There are two good news of the week that we have come up with this week. Sometimes we struggle to find in the good news of the week, and it's probably one of the hardest things to find. But Utsada, I'm glad to report that this week we have two good things that have happened to Hindus in the world. And we're not confined just to America. The first one, Utsada, after many, many years of trying, a Hindu mandir has opened in Ottawa area. Another Hindu mandir has opened, more than a decade in the making, at Fort McMurray. Uh, Fort McMurray gets its very first Hindu mandir. This is in Canada. And Utsada, while we are on a roll, here is the second good news of the week, and that is in Madagascar. A grand Hindu mandir was inaugurated in Madagascar, in Antananarivo. Arrivo. I'm sorry, I'm not pronouncing this right. Their
It's
capital,
Antananarivo.
Antananarivo. Okay, I'll practice this for next time. But this is the Madagascar, for all people who don't know and who have not seen the Disney cartoons. Madagascar is an island in the Indian Ocean. It is a population, it's not a very small island. It's a population of 26 million people. And now there are quite a few Hindus over there. And they got their first major Hindu mandir. There are other smaller Hindu centers over there, but they got a first major Hindu mandir in Madagascar.
You know the Dravidian separatist movement, you know, the Aryan invasion theory based, colonial narrative based Dravidian separatist movement actually believes that Madagascar is and the people of Madagascar are the lost uh, fellow Dravidians who got separated from this larger piece of land that was connected historically millions of, you know, thousands of years ago, called Lemuria. So
Right.
so that there is a whole narrative on that. I'm pretty sure they will be happy that there is a Hindu temple there, you know, but they won't be, because most of that movement has been hijacked by the Christian missionaries, and for some reason they are more happy to see
Yeah.
churches getting built there than
But
temples.
so that I know it's my time to now contain your rhetoric here. I just want to say this, that look, I mean, as much through the history as people have tried to suppress Hindu Dharma has found a way to not just survive but thrive, and uh, and really come up in areas where it didn't exist in past. So you know uh, I am so I'm so glad that in far-flung areas of the world we are now seeing a renaissance of Hindu Dharma, of Sanatan Dharma. A very nice comment on the chat from Wellness Universal. Uh, if somebody is committing to giving 100 copies of and we thank you very much uh, for you know for the kids who attended this particular camp and others that will follow. So thank you. Please, let's talk offline on this. Thank you very much. um, Usada, with that, the Hindu Seva Charity Act, or Hindu Seva or Charity Act of the Week, for people who don't know what Seva means, it is selfless service. And for that, we always start with this little 10-second video.
मनसा सततं स्मरणीयं मनसा सततं स्मरणीयं वचसा सततं वदनीयं मनसा सततं स्मरणीयं वचसा सततं वदनीयं लोकहितं.
And Usada, for this week, I would like to nominate, with your support, I would like to nominate Support a Child. Support a Child is an initiative of World Council of America. Usada, they support kids in India every single day. They take care of their education, they take care of their food and other daily necessities, so that they can get education that they need to succeed in life. This year, Support a Child aims to support 4,500 kids, 4,500 kids in India every single day. So it's not VHPA is not just two talking heads talking away about contemporary American issues, which is important, but we also make impact on day-to-day living in the lives of Hindus, not just in America but around the world. So these people at Support a Child team is organizing a live concert tour to raise the funds, and you can see here, they if you go to supportachildusa.org, supportachildusa.org, you will see the calendar of events that is yet to come. There are about a dozen cities, actually more than a dozen cities, and we release tickets for several of these cities going into October. Going up to the end of August. And a group called Kanak, Khanak, Kanak, is performing this particular set of shows. So, all over America, please find a city that is next to yours. Even if you cannot go, find a way to donate. Go to supportachildusa.org and make a contribution and help a child, succeed in life. So that is the seva charity or act of the week. Please go and support a child at supportachildusa.org. Attend the concert or donate whatever you can. And with that, Utsada, we come to our final segment of the day, the Hindu phobe or the Hindu hater of the week. And Utsada,
Where did
presented
that come
by,
from?
yeah, see, I told you I have a surprise for you.
So
So,
who created
Utsada, that is the Hindu. So let's talk about the Hindu, the Hindu phobe or Hindu hater of the week. So, Utsada, the Hindu hater of the week this week is, let's go here, sharing it in just a second. You remember last week, Utsada, we talked about the Kanvaryas and the Yatra, the Kanvarya Yatra that happened after 2 years because of COVID. They had not been able to do it. And look, Utsada, here are people who are doing something that they've done for hundreds of years, and here people are blocking the roads, uh, throwing contaminated water. I read it in one place, throwing pieces of meat at these people who are doing the yatra. Why are people, Utsada, so threatened? And
Ajay
you're
bhai?
on mute.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, Ajay bhai, this is not new. In the past, also this has been done. Uh, what happens is this is very common in the Indian subcontinent for many centuries, and it used to happen. It was institutionalized during the Mughal period. Actually, the first records of it being institutionalized was during the Mughal period. I don't know whether it was done. I'm pretty sure it was done under the period of the sultans, Delhi Sultanate as well. But the first recorded institutionalization of this kind of attacks on Hindu vernacular cultural events. No, I won't even. So these things became popular in the Hindu society during the time when Hindus were forced to give up their scriptures. They were forced to do pilgrimages to the main pilgrimage centers across. So when these things started getting quashed by the Islamic rulers, then many of these smaller vernacular Hindu practices emerged, and there is a lot of record of it from the Mughal times. So it was done during the Mughal times on the Hindus, in the Mughal Muslim rule. It was practiced during the British times on the Hindus on many occasions, from all the way from Balochistan to what is present in Myanmar. Hindu religious festivals were targeted by Islamists, and it was a big issue during the British rule as well, and it continues even today, even in a country which is free and secular,
And
supposedly
in a country where
led by a Hindu government
yeah, in a country which supposedly persecutes minorities.
in a country which. So this type of attacks have been going on for centuries. It's a way to send a message to the even the majority Hindus at this time, 80% majority Hindus, that even though they might be numerically living as a majority in this part of the world, the larger Islamist narrative will still dominate over you, because it is a global narrative that has global backers, that has ability to perpetuate violence over a long period of time. So it's a psychological tool. And what you saw in the Kanvarya Yatra, even though it happened at a small level in a small area, it resonates and sends a larger message that is a global message.
Absolutely. Thank you, Soda. And that we come to the end of today's Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge again is brought to you by Hindu Pact. Hindu Pact is Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective. It is an initiative of World Hindu Council of America or VHPA. Hindu Lounge comes live every Sunday at 11 o'clock Eastern and 8 o'clock Pacific. Hindu Lounge is hosted by Utsa Chakrabarti. Utsada is the executive director of Hindu Pact, and I am Ajay Shah. I am the president of World Hindu Council of America, or VHPA. With that, we come to an end of today's show, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, Utsada, and for joining everyone. Thank you, and namaste.
Namaste.